I still remember the day I first noticed him moving in across the hall. There was something about the way he carried those heavy boxes with such ease, his t-shirt riding up just enough to reveal a sliver of tan skin above his jeans. I'm not usually one to stare, but there was something magnetic about him that caught my attention immediately. My name is Alex, and I've been living in this apartment complex for nearly 3 years now. It's a decent place in a quiet neighborhood, nothing fancy, but comfortable enough for a single guy like me who works from home as a graphic designer. The rent is reasonable, the neighbors are generally quiet, and until Ryan moved in 2 months ago, my life had settled into a predictable routine that was equal parts comforting and lonely. Being gay in a small city can be isolating sometimes. Not that people are particularly hostile here, but the dating pool is limited, and after a string of disappointing relationships that fizzled out before they really began, I had resigned myself to focusing on my career instead. My apartment became both my office and my sanctuary, a place where I could express myself freely without the judgment or expectations of others. The walls were covered with art that inspired me, some of my own creations and others from artists I admired. It was my space, and I had grown comfortable in my solitude, even if sometimes the silence felt a bit too heavy. When Ryan first introduced himself with that easy smile and firm handshake, I immediately categorized him as straight, the wedding ring on his finger being the most obvious clue. He mentioned his wife would be joining him once she finished up some work in another city. He seemed friendly enough, the kind of neighbor who would nod hello in the hallway but wouldn't impose. We had a few casual conversations while collecting mail or taking out trash, nothing deep, just the kind of surface-level pleasantries that neighbors exchange. He mentioned he was in construction management, and I shared that I worked in design. He seemed genuinely interested when I talked about my projects, and I found myself looking forward to our brief encounters more than I probably should have. Then about 3 weeks ago, I noticed the ring was gone. I didn't ask about it. It wasn't my place to pry, but I couldn't help but wonder what had happened. His demeanor had changed too. The easy confidence was still there, but there was a new heaviness around his eyes, a slight slump to his shoulders that hadn't been there before. Still, we maintained our casual friendship, occasionally exchanging recommendations for local restaurants or complaining about the building's temperamental heating system. Let me explain why this context matters. When you live in close proximity to someone, you develop a sixth sense about them, their routines, their moods, the rhythm of their life. I knew Ryan typically came home around 6, that he ordered takeout on Thursdays, that he went for runs on weekend mornings. So when there was a knock on my door at nearly 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night, I was surprised to find him standing there, looking somewhat hesitant, a six-pack of beer in hand. "Hey, Alex," he said, his voice slightly rougher than usual. "Sorry to bother you so late. Are you alone? I mean, not interrupting anything, am I?" There was something vulnerable in his question that caught me off guard. The hallway light cast shadows across his face, highlighting the sharp angle of his jaw and the slight furrow between his brows. I remember feeling my heart rate pick up slightly, a mixture of curiosity and caution washing over me. "No, not interrupting anything," I replied, trying to keep my voice casual. "Just working on some designs, but I could use a break." I stepped aside, opening the door wider in invitation. "Want to come in?" The relief on his face was immediate and surprising. "That would be great, actually. I've been going stir-crazy in my place. Thought maybe we could hang out, if you're up for it." He held up the beer as if it were an offering or perhaps an excuse. As he walked into my apartment, I was suddenly aware of how personal the space was, my collection of art books stacked on the coffee table, the half-finished illustration on my tablet, the rainbow flag magnet on my refrigerator. I had never hidden my sexuality, but we had never explicitly discussed it either. For a moment, I wondered if he even knew, if it would change the easy camaraderie we had established. But Ryan seemed at ease, settling onto my couch and glancing around with genuine interest. "Your place is so much more put together than mine," he commented, taking in the carefully arranged furniture and artwork. "Mine still has boxes I haven't unpacked." I handed him a bottle opener and sat in the armchair across from him, maintaining a safe distance. "Well, I've had 3 years to get it right," I said with a smile. "And honestly, decorating is part of the job for me. Can't be a designer with a messy space." There was a moment of comfortable silence as we both took a sip of our beers. Then Ryan spoke, his eyes fixed on the bottle in his hands. My wife and I split up, he said abruptly. That's why I moved here. Needed a fresh start. The confession hung in the air between us. I'm sorry to hear that, I said sincerely. That must be tough. He shrugged, but the gesture couldn't mask the pain in his eyes. It was a long time coming. We wanted different things. She wanted to focus on her career in the city, and I was offered this project here. We tried the long-distance thing, but he trailed off, taking another swig of his beer. Anyway, the divorce was finalized last week. Still getting used to it. I nodded, understanding the disorientation that comes with the end of a relationship, even when you see it coming. It takes time, I offered, and it's okay to not be okay for a while. Ryan looked up at me then, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. That's just it, he said quietly. I'm not as devastated as I thought I'd be. Is that terrible? 7 years together, and I feel relief more than anything. The conversation flowed more easily after that confession, as if a barrier had been broken down. We talked about his job, the new development he was overseeing on the edge of town. I showed him some of my current projects, and he asked thoughtful questions about my process. We discovered a shared love for old sci-fi movies and debated the merits of various directors. One beer turned into two, and the initial awkwardness dissolved into genuine connection. What struck me most was how attentive Ryan was, the way he listened when I spoke, how he remembered details from our previous conversations. There was a natural ease between us that I hadn't experienced in a long time. And yes, I was attracted to him. The way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the strong hands that gestured expressively as he told stories, the occasional brush of his knee against mine as he leaned forward to make a point. But I reminded myself firmly that he was straight, recently divorced, and probably just looking for friendship during a difficult time. It was nearly midnight when Ryan glanced at his watch and sighed. I should probably head out. Early meeting tomorrow. He stood, stretching slightly, and I tried not to notice the strip of skin exposed as his shirt lifted. Thanks for this, Alex. I really needed the company. Anytime, I said, meaning it. That's what neighbors are for, right? He hesitated at the door, turning back to face me. Maybe we could do this again? There's a new brewery that opened downtown I've been wanting to check out. I nodded, perhaps too eagerly. Yeah, that sounds great. It's a date then, he said with a smile, and then seemed to catch himself. I mean, not a date, just, you know what I mean. I laughed to ease his discomfort. I know what you mean. Text me when you're free. After he left, I sat in my living room for a long time, replaying the evening in my mind. The way he had relaxed as the night progressed, the lingering glances I thought I caught but couldn't be sure of, the warmth in his voice when he said goodbye. I told myself not to read into it, that he was just a friendly guy going through a tough time who needed connection. But there was a part of me that couldn't help but wonder if there was something more beneath the surface. Over the next few weeks, our hangouts became more frequent. We went to that brewery, where Ryan insisted I try every IPA on the menu despite my protests that I preferred lighter beers. We watched a marathon of classic sci-fi films in my apartment one rainy Sunday, arguing good-naturedly about plot holes and special effects. He helped me assemble a new desk I had ordered online, cursing at the confusing instructions until we were both laughing too hard to continue. Each time, the boundary between friendship and something more seemed to blur just a little. There were moments that made me question my initial assumptions about him. The way his hand would linger on my shoulder a beat too long. How he would find reasons to sit close to me on the couch, our thighs touching as we watched movies. The curious questions he asked about my past relationships, listening intently as I spoke about ex-boyfriends without a hint of discomfort. But I dismissed these as wishful thinking on my part, the projection of my growing feelings onto innocent gestures. Then came last Friday night. Ryan had texted me earlier asking if I was free, saying he needed to talk about something. The seriousness of his message had me worried. Had I crossed a line somehow? Was he uncomfortable with our friendship? I spent the afternoon cleaning my apartment nervously, trying to prepare myself for whatever conversation was coming. When he knocked on my door at 7, I was surprised to see him dressed more nicely than usual. A button-down shirt instead of his typical t-shirt, his hair neatly styled. He seemed tense, shifting his weight from one foot to the other as I invited him in. Everything okay? I asked as he paced around my living room, declining my offer of a beer. Yes. No. I don't know, he said, running a hand through his hair. I've been thinking a lot lately. About my marriage, about why it didn't work, about other things. I sat on the couch, giving him space to continue. He finally stopped pacing and sat beside me, closer than necessary given the ample room on the sofa. Alex, he began, his voice uncertain. Have you ever questioned things about yourself that you thought were set in stone? My heart began to beat faster. I think everyone does at some point, I said carefully. It's part of growing. He nodded, staring at his hands. When my wife and I first started having problems, I thought it was just the distance, the stress of our careers. But the more I've thought about it, the more I realized there were issues long before that. He paused, taking a deep breath. I was never fully present with her. Emotionally, physically. I always felt like I was playing a role I thought I was supposed to play. I remained silent, sensing he needed to get this out without interruption. And then I met you, he continued, finally looking up at me. And I felt more comfortable, more myself in these past few weeks than I did in years of my marriage. And I can't stop thinking about what that means. The air between us felt charged with possibility. What do you think it means? I asked softly. I don't know, he admitted. Or maybe I do, and I'm just scared to say it out loud. His eyes met mine, vulnerable and questioning. Have you ever felt something for someone that completely upends how you see yourself? My throat felt dry. Yes, I whispered. I have. There was a moment of perfect stillness, where the only sound was our breathing. Then Ryan reached out, his hand covering mine where it rested on the couch between us. His palm was warm, slightly calloused from his work, and the simple touch sent electricity through my veins. I've never felt this way about a man before, he said, his voice barely audible. I don't know what to do with these feelings. I turned my hand beneath his, our fingers intertwining. You don't have to do anything, I assured him. There's no rush to figure it all out. But even as I said it, he was leaning closer, his free hand coming up to rest against my cheek. What if I want to? He murmured, his gaze dropping to my lips. I'd like to say I responded with something profound or reassuring, but the truth is that all coherent thought fled my mind as Ryan closed the distance between us. The first touch of his lips against mine was hesitant, questioning, but when I responded, his kiss grew more confident. His hand slid from my cheek to the back of my neck, pulling me closer as the kiss deepened. When we finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. I've been wanting to do that for weeks, he confessed. Every time we're together, it's all I can think about. Why didn't you say something sooner? I asked, my hand still clasped in his. He gave a small laugh. I needed to be sure. This is all new territory for me, Alex. I've never been with a man before. Never even considered it as a possibility until I met you. We talked for hours that night, Ryan opening up about the confusion he'd felt throughout his life, the friendships with men that had always felt more intense than they should, the disconnect he'd experienced in his physical relationship with his wife, the relief he'd felt when their marriage ended mixed with guilt for not being more devastated. I shared my own journey of self-discovery, the challenges and joys of living authentically, the patience it takes to understand yourself. As the night grew later, our conversation became interspersed with more kisses, each one less hesitant than the last. When Ryan's hand slipped beneath my shirt, his fingers tracing patterns on my skin, I pulled back slightly. We should take this slow, I said, though it took all my willpower. This is a big step for you, and I don't want you to regret anything. He nodded, though the desire in his eyes was unmistakable. You're right. I want to do this right. He pressed one more gentle kiss to my lips. But I'm staying over, just to sleep. Is that okay? That night, lying in my bed with Ryan's arm draped over my waist, his breath warm against my neck, I felt a contentment I hadn't experienced in years. There was still so much to navigate, his coming to terms with his sexuality, the newness of our relationship, the practical aspects of dating someone who was still figuring himself out. But in that moment, with the solid weight of him beside me, those concerns seemed manageable. The morning brought a new level of intimacy as we woke tangled together, the early light filtering through my curtains. Ryan's smile was shy but certain as he leaned in for a good morning kiss. No regrets, he whispered against my lips, answering my unspoken question. We've been taking it day by day since then. Ryan has been reading books about bisexuality and sexual fluidity, trying to understand his own experience better. We've had long conversations about what this means for him, for us, for the future. There have been moments of doubt and fear, his worry about how his family might react, my concern about being someone's experiment. But there have been far more moments of joy and discovery. Last night, as we cooked dinner together in my kitchen, moving around each other with the ease of people who have known each other much longer than we have, Ryan wrapped his arms around me from behind and pressed a kiss to my shoulder. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" I asked, turning in his arms to face him. "For being patient. For giving me space to figure things out." His eyes were clear and certain as they met mine. "For showing me that it's never too late to discover new parts of yourself. I don't know what the future holds for us. Relationships are complicated even without the added layer of someone exploring their sexuality for the first time. But I do know that whatever happens, I'm grateful for that night when my straight neighbor asked if I was alone, when he came over and we discovered something neither of us was expecting. Life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. Sometimes the person who helps you understand yourself better is the one you never saw coming. And sometimes the most beautiful connections form in the spaces between what we thought we knew about ourselves and what we're still discovering. Ryan and I are writing our story one day at a time, and for now, that's enough. Total _char_count, 18,583.